Last summer, state lawmakers shot down a bill that would have made single-use plastic bags illegal in Massachusetts. But that hasn't stopped more than 90 cities and towns, including several in our region, from banning them. For instance, Amherst has had a plastic bag ban in place for about 2 years. For perspective on the issue, Carrie Saldo spoke with Kaplan, who leads waste reduction efforts in Amherst. She was also joined in studio by Lorenzo Macaluso of the Center for EcoTechnology to learn more.
I think there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. Certainly there's an increased awareness about the environmental impacts of our waste in general, and plastics is certainly no exception. There's a lot of news about ocean plastics now, and
where we see these pictures of just mounds and mounds of junk in the middle of the ocean. It's really kind of scary.
Sure, and there's such an impact for single-use materials like that, and the production of those, and I think there's also the context that there's been statewide bans of some of those types of materials at a state level for a number of years, and there's still a lot of opportunity to do even more. And so there can be great environmental impact, often cost benefits to this, and sort of community benefits, litter and things like that as well.
And in terms of environmental impact, in some cases, the sea life are eating this stuff, right? They mistake it for food. Certainly we see it caught in trees. Those are just a couple of things that jump to my mind of how this gets in the way in a really practical and challenging sense. Maybe in Amherst, they have banned, the community banned single-use plastic bags about 2 years ago. Sure. So how has that process gone for people there?
Overall, I think it's gone pretty smoothly. There was some opposition initially, some from retailers. Also, I've heard from Big Y, for example, which is the largest
grocery store
in Amherst. That sometimes people complain.
You get in there and you forgot your reusable bags, right, or you don't want to pay.
Yeah, so they do charge, I believe it's 10 cents for paper bags.
Yeah,
so
most places it's about a nickel or a dime, depending, per bag.
Yeah, so it's really a process. It's a transition, time for people to get used to it. Remember to bring the reusable bags, just start to accept it. And I think the more that it happens, more and more towns and cities are doing this.
Yep.
So, I think people they adjust.
And I know that you've been in your position about 1.5 years, so the ban happened before, it was in place for when you came on board. But one of the interesting things that I noted was that there was it seemed to me, a lot of buy-in from the community, whether it was from some of the smaller retailers like Atkins Farms or environmental clubs, probably not surprisingly. Would you know if organizers actively sought to do that, to get that buy-in from the community before they said, you know what, okay, let's take a vote?
Yeah, there was definitely an effort to do that. And they did that also because there's a styrofoam ban also from 2014. And I know that they went to retailers first and talked to different stakeholders in the community to try to get some buy-in. Yeah.
It can have big impacts for a business that's using styrofoam cups or plastic bags, big changes. So when CET is working with clients, is that something that they ask you about or reach out to you and say, hey, is there a different way that we can absorb this cost, or how do we go about this?
Sure. Well, we do a lot of work with businesses and questions about all types of waste, but definitely plastics comes up a lot. One of the things that we do is we run a program for the state DEP called the Recycling Works in Massachusetts, where we provide that type of assistance one-on-one and in a variety of ways through our website and a call center. And one of the things that we're doing this year, actually, because of how many questions there are around plastics, is we're sort of revamping the whole page on plastics, because for businesses, it's not just opportunities for sort of the normal kinds of bottles and things like that we're thinking, but they have a lot of film plastics. They have all sorts of different types of plastics that there are opportunities to either reduce and not have in the first place, or to effectively recycle. And so we're actively working on sort of upping the game on how much resources we have around that to help address that issue. And maybe you bring up Big Y. I think just in the last couple of weeks, they've actually announced that they're going to not ban, but eliminate plastic bags chain-wide. And they've got about 70 or 80 stores across Massachusetts and Connecticut. And I think that in part, the different municipal level bans, and they've been looking at this from a business perspective, and they made that announcement recently, and they're headquartered right here in Springfield.
And then, so there's the business perspective, but then there's the consumer perspective too, right? So whether it's remembering to bring your reusable bags, to actually take them out of the car and bring them into the supermarket with you when you go shopping. But then the tail end of this, if you are using those single-use items, where to recycle them, how to recycle them. To me right now, I think that people run into the challenge of, especially if you're thinking about single-use plastic bags, you actually have to take those back to a grocery store or another store, right? It's very uncommon for you to be able to recycle that at, say, the dump every week. Is that right?
That's right, and in fact, that's one of the challenges that we're seeing right now in recycling overall, that those plastic bags are actually a contaminant for the recycling stream. And
If you bring them to like the transfer station or the dump or something
or if
like
you put
that.
them in your curbside. So one of the things, the state has recently launched a program called Recycle Smart. And there's lots and lots of resources that I would advise anybody to go check out about what really actually does belong in the bin and what doesn't, and what are the options. And
Yeah.
It's actually been a benefit in Amherst because there's been less contamination of plastic bags in the recycling since the ban. I've heard this from haulers, and I see it myself.
You have seen a difference.
Yeah.
So then there's also the additional challenge. So Great Barrington, for instance, banned single-use plastic bottles, say those water bottles that we see, they're kind of ubiquitous now. The challenge there was it was passed, it was approved. However, they didn't have the who, what, when, where, why, the implementation in place of how they were going to take the step of actually working with retailers who might be selling those single-use plastic bottles or things like that. How do you help communities figure that out when you're passing legislation, when you're getting things lined up? Do we know yet? Tough to work on.
In terms of like if we were to pass
So
more
if Amherst were to take up a single-use plastic bottle elimination, do you know the process that you would put in place, or is it too soon to say that?
I mean, that's not being talked about yet. I mean, I definitely think that right now there's a big push just to get businesses to start thinking about it on their own rather than passing a regulation or a ban. Consider making straws, you have to ask for it, to ask for a straw.
Instead of leaving it there on the counter.
Right. So right now in Amherst, at least, we're not discussing any more regulation. Could be down the road.
Something else, in recent weeks, NPR did a series of reports from overseas, actually, about some single-use plastic containers, and I think it was for shampoo, single-serve shampoo and conditioner, things like that. And actually going back to the manufacturer and saying, the onus is on you. You're making this container. If you're going to put this out for people to buy, you need to figure out how they're going to dispose of it. Do you think have we heard any discussion of that here in the U.S.? Do you think that's a good idea?
The term that's usually used for that is extended producer responsibility, where manufacturers do take back of different things. There's some examples of that. The mattress manufacturers are doing some of that kind of work, sometimes in paint or in electronics. Those are the ones that at least that I'm most familiar with. I haven't heard of any for like consumer products here, but I think that sort of all options are worth at least exploring, and that we kind of need an array of solutions, great recycling infrastructure, minimizing waste in the first place, and thinking of creative solutions and exploring how viable they are here.